And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, President-elect Donald Trump on his thank you tour, speaking to supporters. Laura Ingraham, she'll be here in just a minute with reaction. But first, here are some of the highlights.
In filling my cabinet, I'm looking for people who fully understand the meaning of service and who are committed to advancing the common good. I believe we're in the process of putting together one of the great cabinets that has ever been assembled in the history of our nation. Do you like it so far, everybody? But to accomplish our goals, we must reject the failed approaches of the past. Government must stop listening to the special interests and start delivering for the national interest. It's time to deliver for you, the American people, just like Iowa delivered for me. Boy, did you deliver. Boy, did you deliver. The American worker built this country, and now it's time for American workers to have a government that, for the first time in decades, answers to them. We're going to answer to them. My plan begins with bold structural reform to create millions of really good paying jobs. Jobs. Whether it's agriculture, medicine, or military technology, we want the next generation of innovation and production to happen right here in America and right here in Iowa. You're going to be big beneficiaries. Big beneficiaries. First, on taxes. We're going to undertake one of the great tax reforms and simplifications in American history. It's got to be simpler. Too much work, too complicated. At the center of this plan is massive tax relief for the American middle class. Has been forgotten. Forgotten. Boy, did they come out and vote, huh? They came out and voted.
And here now with reaction is Fox News contributor, of course, the editor of Life Z, and a nationally syndicated radio host. Laura Ingraham is back with us. Laura, I like the idea. You don't see many people. I remember Ed Koch always used to go out and thank people when he was the mayor of New York for their vote. I think the idea that you go out, not only thank them, but reassure them that what you promised during the campaign remains your agenda. You know, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I think at this moment, Sean, Trump has a real opportunity to begin to expand the base of the electorate that he attracted on Election Day by continuing to preach the gospel of prosperity, freedom, independence, sovereignty, the rule of law, as applied to everyone, regardless of your skin color, your ethnicity, where you came from. If you're an American citizen, if you played by the rules, you're going to have a much better shot at having more money in your pocket, living a life in safety, and actually happiness if he does what he said he was going to do. And I think the reassurance is smart. I think he should keep doing this throughout his 4 and perhaps 8 years in office. And that'll drive the left crazy, but keep going into those areas where Republicans have traditionally had difficulty and continue to reassure and build on what he started. I'm
going to do my opening monologue in the next segment, and that's about the collective left freakout, which is getting worse every day. But it seems like Barack Obama is jealous that he's not the center of attention, and apparently he's going to go out on his own tour, I guess, to try and steal the thunder from Donald Trump. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to brag on. It's certainly not going to be the number of additional millions of Americans in poverty and food stamps, or the lowest home ownership rate, or doubling of the debt, or Iraq, Afghanistan, China, Russia, or Benghazi. So I'm not sure what he's going to say. But he did take a shot again. Remember when he said Bible thumpers clinging to their guns, Bibles and religion, and that sort of thing? Here's what he said last night on CNN.
There's a reason why attitudes about my presidency among whites in northern states are very different from whites in southern states. So, you know, are there folks whose primary concern about me has been that I seem foreign, the other? Are those who champion the birther movement, you know, feeding off of bias? Absolutely.
So attitudes about my presidency from whites in northern states is different from whites in southern states. How do we interpret that?
Sean, it's both preposterous and pathetic. The idea that you can't harbor a negative view of Obama's accomplishments or lack thereof without being a racist if you're living in the South and are Caucasian means that it's a different type of racism. And it's a different type of bias coming from the left. Again, they're always going to excuse failed liberal policies by trying to play some type of identity politics. In this case, of course, it's the race card. This follows, of course, after people like Eric Holder, who also brought this up a few years back, that the criticism of Barack Obama was based in race. When young people, people in our generation, Sean, I don't care what color your skin is. If your policies work, if they respect the Constitution, they honor our time-tested values, they're going to work, and Americans are going to, like what you did. If you don't do that, doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter what color your skin, there are a lot of Americans who are going to be unhappy with that. That's what happened with Obama. They personally like him, think he's a good father and a good guy, but they don't like the direction the country's gone in. More divided, fewer jobs, more globalization, open borders, and all the rest. But the fall back on the race card, I guess you can't blame Bush anymore, so you just go with race. And stereotyping Southerners, that's just the oldest trick in the liberal playbook. And it's tired. It's just old and it's tired.
But the problem I see for President Obama, and I'm speaking objectively, I always thought he was a radical, rigid, left-wing ideologue. He's never deviated from that. No sister soldier moment. The era of big government is over, the end of welfare. And as a result, there were people like us that were warning that statism, leftism, redistribution failed. His signature program, Obamacare, a disaster. There's no one economic statistic that I can point to that points to success. And I would argue that he played a big role in the election of Donald Trump because of those failed policies.
Well, he's doing a refutation tour now, Sean. Yeah. He wants the historians to write the history of his administration the way he wants it written. And so it's about racism, it's about those awful Southerners, it's about rigid ideology, where I think you're exactly right. He never left the campus. He's still at Harvard University agitating. He's still back on the street corner in Chicago, community organizing. That's what his experience was. That's where he came from. And they always talk about how Trump hasn't evolved to be presidential. I think you can make the argument that Obama never evolved beyond the campus activist setting. He got stuck there, and he never would leave it. There was no moment of recognition or self-reflection on maybe mistakes he made. Instead, it's always the other guy's fault. It's always Fox News, it's talk radio.
Are you worried at all about Donald Trump meeting, saying good things about Obama, meeting with Al Gore, Rombo Deadfish, Mitt Romney? Are you worried about him meeting with any of these people?
Not if he stays true to his campaign promises, his policies, the bedrock of restoring freedom and the rule of law, sovereignty, economic prosperity. He has to stick to those core principles. It doesn't matter in the end with whom he meets if he does the things that he said he was going to do. And I think there's always going to be compromises necessary, but those core values that he ran on and that he won on, he's got to stick to that.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think a lot of people are going to be watching very carefully, and I think people are hopeful for good reason.
All right, Laura, always good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Before we head to break, quick programming note. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan will join us for an exclusive interview. We'll ask him about President-elect Trump repealing, replacing Obamacare, the Trump agenda or the Ryan agenda. You don't want to miss it. And coming up next, not only our opening monologue, but much more.
Obviously, we were surprised by the outcome of the election, and it's kind of, was I'm not sure what the right analogy would be, but like a punch in the stomach, let's say. Soul crushing might be another description.
All right, it's been 1 month since the election. The crybaby left. They're still throwing that hissy fit. We'll have the latest examples. We'll get reaction from the Fives, Eric Bolling, Kimberly Guilfoyle, and much, much more on this busy news night tonight on Hannity.
I'm here today for one main reason: to say thank you to the great, great people of Iowa. You went out and pounded, and I mean pounded, the pavement. You organized your fellow citizens and propelled us to victories at a grassroots and every other level. We have a movement the likes of which this world has never seen before. Never seen before. I also want to give a very special thanks to our veterans. A lot of veterans in this room. Thank you. Thank you. Service members, military families, unbelievable people.
Now, those are highlights from President-elect Trump's thank you tour. Also tonight, the left is still losing their minds over the election, and what I'm about to tell you is almost too good to be true. And that's tonight's opening monologue. All right, so this collective freakout from the crybaby left is now reaching mind-numbing levels. Now, let's go through the very latest, most ridiculous examples. Now, according to the Washington Free Beacon, well, the public relations company founded by CNN's radical Van Jones, they're working with Republican Electoral College electors who plan on voting against Donald Trump on December the 19th. New York Times Magazine says that the Trump victory is so devastating to liberal women in Washington, D.C., that they're now cutting their hair and dyeing it as black as they possibly can because they want to feel empowered in order to oppose President-elect Trump. And that's not all. The Washington Post, they ran a story of what crybaby lefties are now calling the Trump 10. You know, you send your kids off to college, they gain 10 pounds the first year. Well, Clinton voters are apparently so upset, they're blaming Trump because they're gaining weight. And Cosmopolitan magazine, they put out an article with this headline, quote, "I haven't had sex in weeks and I blame Donald Trump." And of course, over at The View, we have Joy Behar and others. They've been losing their collective minds over the election. It's like they've got three Rosie O'Donnells. Take a look.
One smart person said that they think that what's going to really happen is the Republicans are going to turn on him, and Pence will eventually start doing the presidency. What do you think about that? I mean, it was just a guess.
Watch your uterus. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
but this new administration is bringing in something we haven't seen in a long time.
Mental illness.
And that is...
Sorry, go ahead. I couldn't control myself. Sorry.
Ladies, your uteruses will be fine. Then there's President Obama's close advisor, Valerie Jarrett. And here's what she said about the election outcome. Poor woman.
You know, obviously, we were surprised by the outcome of the election, and it's kind of, you know, was I'm not sure what the right analogy would be, but like a punch in the stomach, let's say. Soul crushing might be another description.
So very sad. And of course, left-wing Hollywood, they can't take it either. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Tina Fey is claiming that President Trump will turn the country into Nazi America. And under uber-liberal Michael Moore, well, he's saying Republicans are going to bring about an onslaught of suffering from day one. Watch this.
The majority of Americans, let's say it again, wanted Hillary Clinton. The majority of Americans did not want Donald Trump. It is the responsibility of this minority of Democrats in Congress to block, obstruct, disrupt, and do whatever they can to prevent the onslaught that is going to happen with Donald Trump. He's going to be inaugurated on January 20th and January 21st, which is a Saturday. Don't be surprised if the Republicans call a Saturday session of Congress, and they are going to pass law after law after law and have him sign it the next day, and it's going to be one piece of suffering against people after another. And it is the job of the Democrats now to stop the suffering that he's about to create for the American people.
Michael, calm down. The suffering happened under Obama. 13 million more Americans that are on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. That's Obama's policies. And by the way, the last hit comes from CNN's Chris Cuomo. He's comparing the president-elect and his nominee to the EPA to segregationists. Really? Watch this.
He hasn't denied global warming.
He says it's far from settled.
He says the science
that
is
means
far
he's
from
not
true.
accepting
He's
the
saying
science. Either you accept the science or you don't. 99% of the scientific community says global warming is
CNN says the
impacted by
number's
man.
90%.
People thought the world was flat.
Yes.
People thought blacks and whites shouldn't marry. People thought blacks shouldn't be equal. That doesn't mean that you accept it as fact as a leader.
All right, all of this is so beyond ridiculous. But to my friends in the audience, let me translate what all of this means. It's pretty simple. They lost, they can't handle it, and you won. And hopefully America wins. Right now, with reaction from the hit show The Five, Eric Bolling and Kimberly Guilfoyle, EBKG, and then Chuck Schumer. This actually cracked me up, too. Starting in January, there's going to be a war on old people. So I've been warning my friends that live in the villages to dust off their muskets, their World War II relics, and their knives and their pistols, and get ready, because Donald Trump is sending his army to the villages to beat up on the old people.
Guns and Navarone over there. I love the villages. Adore, actually, is probably the most
Me too. It's
accurate.
awesome. That's
they're fantastic.
All the Fox. We're gonna have the Fox wing in the villages some
For
year.
sure. We're gonna go there and colonize. So here's the thing: all
Colonize?
the crybabies, something like that. Yeah. Fraternize, colonize. Here's the thing: all those crybabies, do they want to be sponsored by Kleenex? Because they're crying every day. They're looking for a sponsorship, whining about everything, keep cutting your hair and acting ridiculous. I mean, it's really unbecoming. I mean, honestly, can you imagine if Donald Trump didn't win the election and people behaved in this fashion?
Could you imagine if Eric started dyeing his hair platinum blonde? I mean, that would be the equivalent.
Lighter. Yeah, I know. It's really crazy.
So, of all the people that you played, I think Michael Moore is the most egregious. Donald Trump went into Michigan. Michael Moore is from Michigan. His Twitter account is MMFlint. He loves Michigan. Michigan voted for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has done nothing but champion the causes of the people he proposes to represent. The working class voter, the union guy. Look what he's done. He's saved thousands of jobs between Ford, Carrier, the Japanese investment.
SoftBank?
Apple. Apple says they want to bring back some of their assembly plants from Indonesia back to America. And they've done that because Donald Trump is elected president.
It's interesting because what he said is he'll call every CEO that's thinking about moving their business down to Mexico. Now, what is he going to do? Is he going to offer them money? No, he's saying the regulatory environment, the bureaucracy is going to change. The tax benefits are going to be massive.
Can I throw something out here?
Yeah.
What Donald Trump did was, okay, so for probably the better part of the last 20 years, we've been told globalism is better. Bigger is better. So the bankers love this. Bankers go, this is fantastic for us. We're going to get free money from the Fed. They turn around, loan money to the CEOs. The corporate CEOs go, this is great for us, too. We're getting money, and we're also pushing jobs overseas where they're cheaper. And then they pay off the politicians to keep this circle of life going between them. Trump says, you know what? Globalism doesn't work for us anymore. Nationalism works for us. We want America to be strong. He broke this chain.
Listen,
and they're worried
I'm
about
warning
it.
everybody that liked Donald Trump. You better get ready. You better buckle up. It's going to be a rough ride in the first 200 days of this administration because they are going to have a massive collective meltdown freakout.
Of course, but go ahead and let them, but these are the same people that were complaining and saying that he wasn't going to honor the election. They're the ones not honoring it. Michael Moore is the one that's calling for anarchy, saying to disrupt the election results and go ahead and protest and calling for all this ridiculousness to try and impede Donald Trump, the president-elect, from becoming the next president of the United States and doing this at the time of the inauguration. I mean, he's literally out there trying to incite riots and problems like this.
Well, we're going to put suffering on the American people. Well, with 13 million more Americans on food stamps and 8 million more in poverty and the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, the suffering has already happened. Undoing the mess is what this is going to be about, not creating suffering.
Suffering was created by liberal rule in democratic cities across this country, and they are the ones that are worse off, and that's why Donald Trump said, what do you have to lose?
All right, coming up next tonight on Hannity.
Maybe, the choice of words weren't the best, but the ultimate message was the same. He didn't tell the truth.
It was rigged, I think.
All right, Carrier's union boss continues to call President-elect Trump a liar, even though Carrier did, in fact, confirm over 1,100 jobs are slated to stay in the U.S. after Trump's efforts. Anthony Scaramucci and the one and only Lou Dobbs join me next with reaction, and also later tonight.
It started with the hands up, don't shoot lie that was propagated by every mainstream liberal media across this country. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune.
Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark is calling out the mainstream media for their blatant double standard in reporting so-called fake news. Sheriff Clark will join us to explain on this busy edition of Hannity. Straight ahead.
It
was you saying that the president-elect lied his blank off that got him to go after you on Twitter. Do you regret saying that?
No, I do not. Maybe, the choice of words weren't the best, but the ultimate message was the same. He didn't tell the truth. He inflated the numbers, and I called him out on it.
President-elect Trump is coming under attack from a carrier union boss who continues to call him a liar over comments about saving jobs at the company's Indiana factory. Now, the president-elect, he took to Twitter to respond, saying the union didn't do anything to try and save those jobs, but let's set the record straight. Now, Donald Trump did not lie. He said the company would be saving 1,100 jobs, which is what Carrier put out in a statement saying, quote, "We are announcing today that Carrier will continue to manufacture gas furnaces in Indianapolis in addition to retaining engineering and headquarters staff, preserving more than 1,000 jobs." With reaction, the author of Hopping Over the Rabbit Hole, a New York Times bestseller, Trump Transition Team Executive Committee member Anthony Scaramucci, longest intro in history, and from the Fox Business Network, everybody knows him, Lou Dobbs. So the bottom line is, look, I love that deal, but I think I love the deal where the guy from the bank and from the group was
Masayoshi-san.
Yeah, I mean, $50 billion, 50,000 jobs. Yeah. Lou, you've been in business a long time.
It's an incredible, incredible validation of what Donald Trump is bringing to his new presidency. I mean, when you have people coming to him talking about direct investment, we can't get corporate America over the course of the past decade to bring back $2.5 trillion that they've got in overseas profits in offshore banks to invest in this country. And here is Masha coming with money and ideas.
And ideas. Add to that, U.S. Steel is now saying they want to bring back 10,000 workers. So it seems to be a domino effect here.
But also, Sean, think about this. We're going to cut the tax rate from 35% to 15%. And so you won't have to do a deal-by-deal thing. You're going to just lower the boom on everybody and make America so much more attractive to invest in. So that's the key thing. Plus the regulation, Sean.
And he's not, what is he promising? He said he'd also call any other company that wanted to leave the U.S. What is he promising? Get rid of burdensome regulation. Lower the corporate tax rate.
Make it more attractive to be here.
Allow the repatriation money to come in.
But with an important quid pro quo.
Right.
That you don't ship away middle-class jobs, that you do not arbitrage labor rates, that you end this absolute hemorrhaging of our middle class, which has been shrinking for the past 15 years rather than growing. Under President Trump, this will be reversed so long as he adheres to talking to any CEO who is thinking about shipping a job or a plant overseas because of labor rates.
All right, let's add these calls to the 10% repatriation tax to multinational corporations bringing money back, to a 15% corporate tax rate, 7 brackets to 3. Then we'll add to that Obamacare. Won't that end up being like a tax rebate?
No question.
All right, add that to energy independence. Do we not have a formula for pretty significant growth? Will it reach 4%? Will it reach 4.5%?
You can get 4% growth. You can double the economy in 18 years, and you solve all the entitlement problems. 4% growth gets you 18 years of a double in the economy. But the other thing, Sean, you're going to engage the middle and working class in the virtuous cycle of consumption. At the end of the day, working class people will be able to spend money, they'll have more disposable income, and that's where you'll get the growth.
Why am I worried about one thing? $1 trillion. Paul Ryan couldn't answer the question in 60 minutes. $1 trillion in infrastructure spending. We need to rebuild infrastructure, but we only really get 50 cents on the dollar if it goes through the bureaucracy in Washington, Lou. Would it be better to hand that money to an independent outside advisory group rather than those 535 guys that use it for power?
Well, I think what would be better, in point of fact, is to have a targeted infrastructure plan with those federal dollars moving directly into the economy. We have seen enough of bridges to nowhere, roads to nowhere, and by the way, you get to keep the potholes, you get to keep all of the decaying infrastructure.
Can I give you some comfort on that, though, because I'm working inside the transition? I really do think we're going to have an asset allocation model and a cost-benefit analysis model that's very
pay-as-you-go?
I wouldn't say pay-as-you-go, Sean, but I would say hopefully we'll get the $1 trillion block, and then we'll be able to set it up in a way where you could look at it and I could look at it and say, okay, that's good business for America. There'll be positive externalities and a multiplier effect on the infrastructure.
Two of the most extraordinary infrastructure plans are the space program and the interstate highway program.
No question.
They didn't sit around worrying about the direction of the velocity of money that they were generating, either the amounts or the rate of velocity.
Remember,
they went after the problem and they solved it. And guess what? The economics and the finances follow. You do not, I mean, and we've got a bunch of so-called wonks in Washington. And by the way, these are the most dangerous people in Washington as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you.
They're standing between people of action and achievement.
All right.
Trump will reverse that.
He's a project manager. That's the key.
Every night on the Fox Business Network. Anthony, good to see you, too. Congrats on the book. Up next tonight on this busy news night here on Hannity.
It started with the hands up, don't shoot lie that was propagated by every mainstream liberal media across this country. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune.
Sheriff David Clark exposing the mainstream media and their hypocrisy over, quote, fake news. Remember, hands up, don't shoot? That was a lie. He'll be along with Eric Guster. We'll debate that issue. Also later, President Obama is not telling the truth about the rise of ISIS. Dr. Sebastian Gorka is here later to respond to that and much more. Straight ahead. Welcome back to Hannity. So a good friend of the show, Sheriff David Clark, he made waves when he called out the hypocrisy of the mainstream media over fake news, tweeting, quote, fake news was born in August 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, when the MSNBC, mainstream media, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, all propagated the hands up, don't shoot lie. Now, here are just a few examples that he mentioned. Take a look.
Outrage in Ferguson, Missouri today after police shot and killed an unarmed teenager Saturday afternoon in broad daylight.
The kid body jerked as if he was hit from behind, and he turned around and he puts his hands up like this, and the cop continued to fire until he just dropped down to the ground and his face just smacks the concrete.
So when he turned and faced him and put his hands up, was he standing still at that point?
Yes.
Thousands of Americans are marching in New York and Washington and across the country, demanding a justice system that applies the same to everybody and honors our values. And we want you to know that our hearts are out there marching with them.
Oh, they all had their hands up. Don't shoot. All this began when the mainstream media took the word of Michael Brown's friend when he gave his version of the shooting that day back in 2014. Watch this.
His weapon was already drawn when he got out the car. He shot again, and once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, and he started to get down, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn, and he fired several more shots.
Joining us now, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, trial attorney, political commentator Eric Guster. That was the guy that was with Michael Brown, Sheriff, when he robbed and intimidated the clerk before they were confronted by the police officer. Isn't that true? And then the media took that lie and they ran with it without any fact checking. There were a number of people in the trial that ended up, or when they had the grand jury, that ended up saying it didn't happen that way. They said he charged the officer, he engaged the officer, tried to take the officer's gun. And that's why Darren Wilson was never indicted, right?
Well, it's why I said, Sean, that fake news has a birthplace and a birthday, August 9th, 2014, when this widely held false belief of hands up, don't shoot was propagated by the media. They went down there and fit their narrative. Think about what happened off that fake news, Sean. It changed America. This anti-police sentiment rose out of this. This, what I call the bastard child of hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter, grew out of this thing. It swept the country. There are people to this day, Sean, who believe that Mike Brown had his hands up and was walking away with his back turned to Darren Wilson when Darren Wilson shot and killed him. In fact, we all know that's a lie. And only one Washington Post writer had the character, had the integrity to admit that it was a lie. I think it was Jonathan Capehart is his name, who wrote an op-ed and said, yeah, we got hoodwinked on that thing. It was embarrassing for this industry, and he had the courage to do it. But to this day, no other media outlet has done it.
No, Eric, you do know that that never happened, right? You're not arguing that hands up, don't shoot actually happened, are you?
I'm not arguing that hands up, don't shoot ever happened.
Because
but what David Clark is trying to, no, it did not happen. But what David Clark is saying is the dumbest thing I've heard on TV since Florida said they were going to beat Bama. What he's claiming is the hands up, don't shoot movement was the beginning of fake news sites. The Onion was started in 1988, which is the premier fake news site.
Eric, that's a satire site.
It is fake. It is a fake news site that some people think is real.
But in a serious sense, that false narrative was perpetrated by NBC, by ABC, by CBS, by CNN, by the New York Times, and
they came out and said it was a lie.
Hang on a second. And irresponsibly, they advanced a narrative where people were regurgitating it, and then as a result, a certain expectation was raised. And then when the black eyewitnesses testified before that grand jury, it wasn't the outcome that people expected. And what happened, Eric, as a result of their irresponsible reporting? What happened?
A lot of people fell for that. But all those media sites, all those NBC, MSNBC, all of those sites, CNN, all those stations came out and said, all of them did. They said that was a lie. I've said it was a lie. So let's not.
I don't remember them saying it was a lie. I don't remember a big apology saying we were wrong and we falsely reported from a guy that robbed up a store and intimidated a clerk. Sheriff Clark.
They did say that was not true. They did. No, let me finish. They did say that was not true. And for you to say, for Clark to claim that was the beginning of fake news is the most ridiculous thing.
Sheriff Clark. Sheriff, you want to respond?
Well, it's fine. It might be ridiculous, but I'll tell you what, we have dead cops because of that hands up, don't shoot lie. We had 2 in New York. We also had 5 in Dallas and some in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, people who were trying to avenge for the life of Mike Brown, who was a thug. Here's another thing they left out of that story.
Been 11
Mike
cops
Brown had
killed
just
by white
strong-armed a convenience store clerk who was half his size. That is a felony in every state in America. And he also tried to disarm a law enforcement officer. That's how serious this was. It might sound dumb to you, but there are dead cops because of that fake news story out of Ferguson, Missouri. And, Eric, I resent that coming from you.
No, your theory is dumb. Someone attacking cops is a personal thing to me. I do not want anyone to assault, harm, or kill cops.
Then don't make irresponsible comments from the media that suggest something that never, excuse me, they advanced a false narrative, a lie. And as a result of the lie, people believed it. And a certain expectation increased in people in terms of what the outcome would be as a result of the lie that it was all predicated on. That's the problem.
But the truth is,
Eric,
no, the truth
let me help you out here. The only people who believe the Onion are liberals, because liberals don't critically think
of African Americans
they're susceptible to nonsense,
being
and all they can do is parrot talking points.
Last word, Sheriff.
No, the Civil Rights Division stated that.
Last word, Sheriff. Let the Sheriff have the last word.
Fine. Thank you, Sean. Again, fake news, you know, most people can figure it out. It might last a day or two. But the hands up, don't shoot fake news out of Ferguson, Missouri continues to this day. And cops are still being killed across this country based off of that fake news story.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you both. And coming up next tonight on this busy news night on Hannity.
The ability of ISIL to initiate major land offenses, that was not on my intelligence radar screen.
Wow. President Obama said the true potential of ISIS wasn't on his radar screen. Well, maybe he should have just listened to his top intel officials. We'll check in with Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He'll join us next to discuss just how President Obama got it so wrong and the implications of that bad decision, and more tonight on Hannity.
The police and first responders were incredible. The job done in particular by one young gentleman was incredible. And I got to meet him, and he was very brave.
All right, that was President-elect Donald Trump speaking earlier about the Ohio State terror attack. Meanwhile, President Obama continues to mislead you, the American public, about the rise of ISIS. Let's take a look.
The rise of the Islamic State surprised you. It took you by surprise. It took the administration by surprise.
The ability of ISIL to initiate major land offenses, that was not on my intelligence radar screen.
That's impossible. How could they not be on his radar screen? Did he not hear these dire warnings coming from America's top intelligence experts, including the director of the National Intelligence Agency, James Clapper? Watch this.
In Syria, what's going on there is in maybe some respects, a new Fatah force. And what's going on there and the attraction of these foreign fighters is very, very worrisome.
With the growth, as you pointed out, of terrorist elements in places like Syria and Yemen, we have a number of fronts that we need to confront simultaneously.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is a designated global terrorist under U.S. law, and we believe is currently based in Syria. His mission, as clearly stated in his own statements, is to carve out a zone of governing territory from Baghdad through Syria to Lebanon.
So how did the president get it so wrong? Joining me now with reaction, the author of Defeating Jihad, the Winnable War, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Let's go back to 2007. Then President George W. Bush, he warned exactly, with pinpoint accuracy, what would happen if we cut out of Iraq too early. Listen to this, Dr. Gorka.
Begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
Not only did they get the safe haven, but also the oil money so that they could advance the caliphate. He could have listened to any number of people, Dr. Gorka. How could he possibly say what he's saying that he didn't see it coming?
Very simply, Sean, remember he said in that interview that it wasn't on the radar screen for him. Well, Sean, you need to be looking at the radar screen if you're looking for threats. We know, this is publicly disclosed information, that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, received and read less than half of his presidential daily intelligence briefings. You're not going to know what's on the radar screen if you don't look at the radar.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
No. Well, as late as 2014, he referred to ISIS as the JV team. As in October 2015, that's a year ago, a little over a year ago. He's saying that ISIS is contained. What Alice in Wonderland world is he living in?
He said ISIS is contained, and Secretary Kerry said that we are winning this war 3 days before the San Bernardino attack. That was the largest attack on U.S. soil until the Oklahoma massacre. The fact is, this administration has allowed politics to trump national security and the safety of Americans. Remember, Sean, when this senator from Illinois that nobody heard of ran for president, he had a very simple bumper sticker. He said, Afghanistan is the quote-unquote good war and Iraq is the bad war, which meant when he became president, he was locked in ideologically to ending the war in Iraq and pulling our troops out before we'd actually finished the job. He allowed his political commitment and his ideology to trump the actual execution of the mission. Because in my analysis of the history of war, you can only win by actually destroying the enemy. Removing your troops from the battlefield is not the definition of victory, but President Obama thinks it is.
Did you meet with President-elect Trump, and is there any chance you might join his administration?
I'm in regular contact with General Mike Flynn, his national security advisor. I'll be in New York later this week, but I haven't seen Mr. Trump since last year. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens.
All right, Dr. Gorka, I think you'd be a great addition, my humble opinion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, when we come back, a very important question of the day is straight ahead. Time for our question of the day. Should the mainstream media apologize for spreading the fake news of hands up, don't shoot, that lie? What do you think? Go to Twitter, @Sean Hannity, go to Facebook, and, of course, any other social media outlet you like. Quick programming note, tomorrow night, 10 Eastern, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan will join us for an exclusive interview And we'll ask him about Donald Trump repealing, replacing Obamacare, about immigration, about education, about repatriation, about all of those issues. Tomorrow night, 10 Eastern. That's all the time we have left this evening. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.